Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, but you can call me Tiff. Today I'm doing another Tasty True Crime Tuesday. And basically what that means is I'm going to eat and I'm going to tell you about a true crime story that I've been researching. So if you like true crime and if you like food and you like a bit of makeup, I'd highly suggest that you subscribe to my channel because that's what this channel is all about. Makeup, food, true crime, basically. Today, I've got McDonald's and I'm excited. I put my Coke in this cup because the straws, I know that they're for a good cause, but we just don't vibe, do you know what I mean? I got the new garlic and cheese bites from, I was going to say M&S then, it's clearly not M&S. I got a Chicken Legend. I've never opted for a Chicken Legend before, but I was just fancying some chicken today. So yeah, I'm going to dig into this. I want to try these really quickly and see what they're like. I don't know how I feel about those. I'm going to try it with the rich tomato dip. No. These are nice, but they taste garlicky, which is good, but it's like artificial garlic, if that makes any sense. Like, it doesn't taste like real garlic. Okay, and then I'm gonna eat this. I got the hot and spicy mayo one. I'm not a spicy person, so I don't know why I went for that, but okay, so let me give this a try. I don't know if McDonald's is just having a bad day, but this isn't that good either. I don't understand. Okay, final bite. Okay, now that I've stuffed my face and I'm full to the brim, let's crack on with today's story. Today we're going to be talking about Douglas Clark and Carol Bundy. And Douglas and Carol, they were lovers and they terrorised LA for a while in the 1980s. And I just want to mention really quickly that Carol Bundy has no connection to Ted Bundy. When I first heard Carol Bundy, I was like, did Ted marry another psychopath? Like, what? But no, there's no connection whatsoever. Carol was born Carol Mary Peters on the 26th of August 1942 to Charles and Gladys Peters. And I believe that Carol was their second child. The first child was a son. And then they went on to have a few more children. From the get-go, Carol had a terrible, terrible childhood. Both of her parents were raging alcoholics. Her father used to move the family from town to town looking for work. Gladys was a hairdresser and she was really focused on appearances and she was really focused on being pretty and being beautiful and her children being pretty. Sadly, Carol, she wasn't blessed with beauty. And because of this, Gladys hated her, absolutely despised her. So much so that when Carol was 8 years old, she returned home from school, and when she returned home, the door was locked, so she couldn't get in. So she knocked on the door and she said, "Hi, like, Mum, can you let me in?" And Gladys was like, "No, you're not coming in. You're not my daughter, you don't live here, go away." So she kept trying and Gladys was like, "You're not my daughter, I don't know you, you don't live here, you're no daughter of mine, go away." She made Carol stay outside until Charles come home, and the only reason that Carol was allowed back in the house was because of Charles, because he demanded that Carol be let back in the house. Anyway, from that moment forward, Gladys, she just acted like Carol wasn't alive. She acted like she wasn't there. She didn't converse with her, she didn't take any notice of her. It was absolutely awful, an awful situation and environment to be in. When Carol was 11 years old, her mother, Gladys, actually died, passed away suddenly. And because Carol was the eldest girl in the house, her father basically forced her to take on the mother role. So that's what she did. She started looking after the other children, she started cooking, she started cleaning. And then not only did she have to do all that, but then her father started making her sleep in the bed with him. And he didn't just make her sleep in the bed with him, he also made her sleep with him. 11 years old. 11 years old, and your father is abusing you like that. Like, it's absolutely sick. And I'm not trying to make excuses for what she went on to do, but just think about how horrific her childhood has been already. Now, Doug, on the other hand, Doug had a completely different upbringing. He was born on the 10th of March 1948. I couldn't find out what his mum's name was, but his father's name was Franklin Clark. And because of his job, because he was an intelligence officer in the Navy, they got to travel a lot because of this. And they actually lived in India for a while. And then when Doug was a teenager, his parents decided to send him to a boarding school in Switzerland. In some of the sources that I've read, it said that he dubbed himself as like the king of one-night stands. He was a ladies' man, he thought he was a smooth talker. But he was actually expelled from this boarding school in Switzerland. I couldn't find out the reason why, but you can bet your bottom dollar it was something to do with probably trying to pursue a girl that didn't want to be pursued. So after he was expelled from the school in Switzerland, his parents sent him to a prep school in America, and this prep school was meant to be like one of the best. And when he got to this school, he started his antics again, started sleeping around, blah blah blah. But this time he took it a bit further. He would put recording devices in his room, he would bring girls back, he would sleep with them, record him sleeping with them. They had no idea. And then he would then share this recording with his other students, with his fellow students. Like, that is just sick. And I think it is important to note that it was said that Doug was very bright, he was very smart, and his teachers and his fellow students thought that he would go on to be a success and to create a really good career for himself. Now, Carol's situation stayed very much the same. She was still at home, she was still being abused by her father, she was still looking after the household. But as Carol started to develop and started to go through puberty, she didn't blossom into a beautiful swan. She remained very plain and very plump, and she had these very thick round lenses, glasses, like the lenses were so thick that her eyes looked huge because the prescription must have been so strong. But as she started to develop and she went through puberty, she developed these really, really large breasts, and she started to notice that her large breast brought a lot of attraction and attention to her from men, and she really liked this. So she started to become very, very promiscuous, and she started to sleep around a lot and sleep with different men. And then at 17 she met a 56-year-old man, and she decided to marry this man. And in the sources that I read, it said that this man was very, very abusive to Carol, just like her father. Carol then decided to study as a nurse. Eventually she finished her studies and she did graduate and become a nurse, and eventually she secured a job at the Valley Medical Centre, and this is where her career began, basically as a nurse. So when Doug finished school, like I said, he was very bright, he was very clever. A lot of people thought that he was going to go on to be something great and be big and have a really good career, but instead he didn't live up to his potential. Instead, he moved to California and he decided to get a job as a boiler operator. And this shocked a lot of people because they thought, like I said, he was going to go on to be the next president or something. I mean, God forbid. In a lot of sources it said that Doug didn't have a permanent place to stay. He didn't have a flat or a house or an apartment. So what he would do, he would go to work during the day, and then in the evening he would go to bars, he would pick up ladies, one, for sex, but two, because he needed a place to stay. So he'd like literally be using them for their bed, and then he'd get up in the morning, go to work, and the cycle would start all over again. Now, one night in December 1979, Doug decided to go to a bar called the Little Nashville Club. And when he walked into the club, you'll never guess who he saw. Yes, that's right, Carol Bundy, sitting at the bar. So Carol was there watching her lover at the time, Jack Murray, perform. So she would go to work, she'd do her shift as a nurse, and then she'd come home and she'd go to the bar and then she'd watch Jack perform. And I'm not sure if Doug picked up on her vulnerabilities or he sensed that she was insecure, but he just made beeline for her, just straight away, just went straight up to her. And at this point in Carol's life, she had literally just got out of her 3rd marriage, and once again, all 3 of her marriages have been very, very abusive, but I think this one was pretty bad. And she had 2 sons by this man as well. She's definitely vulnerable at this point, and he's probably picked up on that somehow, because I don't know, these men just do, don't they? They just seem to have a radar. So Doug and Carol, they start talking and they start drinking together, and eventually they actually leave together and they go back to Carol's apartment. Now, I'm not sure how, but Doug managed to convince Carol to let him move in to her apartment with her and her 2 sons. This guy that she's met, just met now, just knows him for 5 minutes, and she's like, okay, yeah, sure, you can come and move in, that's fine, like, this is not weird at all. So Doug moves into Carol's apartment, and this is where he starts to divulge his dark fantasies to Carol. Like, I know that people have like fantasies, sexual fantasies, oh, I want you to dress up as a nurse or put handcuffs on me, whatever, but the things he was saying that he wanted to kidnap somebody, he wanted to murder them, and he wanted to rape them.
Boy, if you don't get...
Now, sorry, if the person that I just met told me that, bye babes, there's the door, you're an absolute psychopath, clearly. But for some reason, this didn't frighten Carol off, and I don't know whether it's because she thought, oh, he's just saying it, like, he doesn't mean it. Big mistake.
Big mistake. Big. Huge.
But then on the other hand, Carol sent her 2 sons to go and live with the ex-mother-in-law. So I don't know whether Carol was a bit like, yeah, you're weird, I'm gonna get my sons away from you, or it was more a case of, I don't want my sons getting in the way with me and my new partner, my new fella. I feel like it's probably the latter. So Carol and Doug, they are in the apartment, they're doing their thing, and then eventually Doug starts to comment on Carol's appearance, and he starts to say that she isn't doing it for him anymore, and he needs something more, he needs something else. And this bit really upsets me, really gets me. Carol had an 11-year-old neighbour, a little girl, that obviously lived next to her because she was her neighbour. And Doug somehow managed to convince Carol to lure this 11-year-old girl into their apartment so he could sexually assault her. And Carol went along with it. This little girl was at the same age as Carol when Carol started being abused. And I just think surely Carol, she would have had this sense of, I don't want it to happen to anyone else. Clearly not though, clearly not, because she did lure this little girl into the house. He did abuse her, Doug abused her, and he actually took pictures of this abuse as well, which is just absolutely sick. He was literally recording it and keeping images so he could go back and relive what he'd done to this poor girl. And this abuse, it carried on, it didn't stop, it literally carried on. Then after a few months of abusing this poor child, he then said to Carol again, it's not enough, I want more, I want more. And this time he said to Carol, I want to kill someone, I want to rape and kill someone. And once again, I'm not sure if Carol just didn't believe him, or I don't know. I don't know what was going through her head, but she was like, okay, yeah, cool, like, you go do that. So, Doug started driving down a place called the Sunset Strip. And the Sunset Strip is basically what it sounds like. It's a strip of restaurants, clubs, bars. During the day, it's really nice. During the night, not so nice. There's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of sex work. It's a pretty dangerous place to be in when it's dark. When the sun goes down, you probably should just go home and lock your doors, do you know what I mean? So Doug decides to start driving up and down the strip, the Sunset Strip, and he's basically looking for a victim. That's his goal. On the night of June 12th, 1980, Doug's in his car, he's driving down Sunset Strip, and he sees these two young girls. And he pulls up to them and he says, "Do you need a ride?" And they do need a ride, so they say, "Yeah, we do." And he's like, "Get in, I'll take you wherever you need to go." These two young girls were stepsisters, Cynthia Chandler and Gina Mariano. I think I'm saying her surname correctly. If I'm not, I'm so sorry. And they'd actually run away from home. And I think probably because there was two of them, they had like this sense of protection almost, as if like, because there was two of them, nothing or no one could harm them. Anyway, they got into Doug's car and Doug started driving around for a while, and he was pretending he was going where they'd asked to be dropped off. And then eventually he stopped in a dark alley. He pulled up the side of the road and he demanded that they both perform oral sex on him. This is a 16 and 15-year-old girls. This is their children, okay? They're children. So obviously they say no, no thank you. But Doug, he wasn't having any of that. He wasn't taking no for an answer. And from the sources that I've read, it sounds like Cynthia caved in, she gave in. So she started to perform this certain act on Doug while her stepsister was in the back watching. And whilst Cynthia's head was in Doug's lap, he turned around and he shot Gina point blank, straight in the head, boom. So this loud noise and the gunshot has obviously scared Cynthia, so she's jumped up. He's then shot Cynthia point blank in the head as well. He then decided to drive to a garage that he owned with the two girls, their two bodies in his car. He drove to this garage, he removed both of them from his car. He then decided to abuse, if you get my drift, he abused both of the bodies. He then put them both back in the car and he dumped them near the Ventura freeway. And the girls' bodies were actually discovered the next day. But when Doug got home, he told Carol what he'd done. He said, "Listen, I've just killed two girls." And Carol actually rang the police. She said, "There's somebody that I know that's just killed two girls." And the most annoying thing is the operator who answered Carol's call accidentally cut the line. But this all could have been, it could have been done. Carol never called back. So I just, oh. Anyway, Carol didn't call back, the police couldn't trace the call, and in the end, no further action was taken. So Doug was left to roam the streets. 12 days later, Doug decided to strike again. But this time, Carol decided to involve herself, which I can't understand it. On one side, she was gonna she rang the police about these two poor girls that were just murdered by her partner. And now she wants to join in. It's almost like she had this fighting battle with herself, like, I should report this and protect these people. And then she thought, hang on, maybe if I do this with him, he'll love me even more. Anyway, once again, Doug took to the streets. He took to the Sunset Strip. He was in his car driving. Carol was next to him. They were both on the lookout for another victim. And this is where they saw a girl that's only ever been identified as Kathy. So Doug basically said to Carol, like, you look harmless, basically. You look absolutely harmless. If I pull up, can you talk to her and get her to come and get in the car? Carol was like, yeah, sure, babes. I don't mind, whatever. I'll do anything for you because I love you. So they go up to Kathy and Carol starts talking to her and says, like, me and my partner, we just want to have like a good time, you know? We just want to have a good time, like three of us. Do you want to jump in the car? So Kathy's like, oh, I mean, look at this harmless, plump lady with thick rimmed glasses. As if she's going to do anything to me. Yeah, right. So Kathy gets in the car. Carol gets out of the front seat. She gets in the back and Kathy gets in the front. And they drive around for a little while. It had been decided before they picked up anyone that Carol was going to kill this person they picked up. And Carol was meant to give some sort of signal to say to Doug that she was ready to like pull the trigger. So Doug decides to drive off again. He's driving down the road. Then he pulls into another alley and he says to Kathy, I want you to perform oral sex on me. So Kathy starts performing the act on him. And something happened. I don't know what happened. But apparently he got angry. So instead of Carol shooting her, he shot Kathy instead. And after he shot Kathy, they just continued to drive around for a while, like he did with Cynthia and Gina. And then they decided to dump her body next to the Magic Mountain amusement park. Now, Kathy's body was found, but unfortunately, she's never been identified. She's always remained as a Jane Doe. They do believe that she was around 16 to 25 at the time of her murder. Now, after they had killed Kathy, Doug decided to drop Carol home, and then he went back out onto the Sunset Strip. So he was driving around again looking for another victim, and this is where he spotted Exie Wilson. Now, Exie Wilson was a 20-year-old sex worker, and from what I've read, when Doug first approached Exie, he tried to, like, you know, sweet talk her to get into the car, and apparently Exie gave him a bit of attitude, like she was rude to him. And Doug was like, oh no honey, I don't know who you think you're talking to, but it surely ain't me. Eventually he managed to lure her into the car, and I mean, let's be honest, he didn't really need much of a reason to kill anyone. So the fact that Exie gave him a bit of lip, it wasn't good. It wasn't good for her. Anyway, we all know how this story goes by now. He drives around for a while, then he pulls up in a dark alley and he demands that Exie gives him oral sex. So Exie performs the act on him, and whilst Exie's head is in his lap, he shoots her. Now, when Doug shot Exie in the head, it caused her body to spasm, and then that caused for her to bite down, if you get what I'm saying. So Doug started screaming in pain. He managed to release himself from Exie, but he was furious. He was livid. I mean, he didn't seem to think that it was his fault, like he's just killed someone while they're performing a certain act on him, but it's not his fault. Jesus, how dare she? How the hell dare she? And because he's so enraged, he decides to cut Exie's head off. Yeah, you heard that right. He cuts the head off, he stuffs it in a black bag, and he puts it in his back seat. And then he has the nerve to go back out onto the strip again for a third time that night. And when he picked up Exie, she was actually talking to another sex worker called Karen Jones, and he recognised Karen. He thought that's the lady that Exie was talking to. So he's pulled up to Karen and said, hey, like, do you want to show me a good time? So Karen, none the wiser, not even realising that her friend's head is in the back of his car, gets in his car. And once again, he drives around, he pulls into a dark alley, and he demands oral sex of Karen. Karen just trying to make a bit of money, she's like, okay. And whilst her head is in his lap, he shoots her. I mean, did he not learn his lesson with Exie? That's so stupid. Like, his pee-pee could literally just be... That would have been the best thing, to be honest. I wish that would have happened. When he'd finished, he drove around. He didn't even park. He just drove around. He opened the passenger door and just pushed her out and then closed it again. Like, how disrespectful can you fucking be? Genuinely. Remember, Exie's head is still in the back of his car, still in the back seat. He decides to take Exie's head, take it into Carol's apartment and put it in the fridge. The fridge. Could you imagine? Could you imagine coming home from a long shift at work, opening the fridge door, and there's just a head staring at you? What do you think Carol did? Do you think she rang the police? Do you think she said, my psycho boyfriend has just chopped someone's head off? No, 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 no. Carol decides to start putting makeup on Exie's head. And the reason she does this is because Doug wants to pleasure himself with the head, if you understand what I mean. I'm not going to say it because it's absolutely disgusting. Carol makes Exie's face up or her head up so Doug can take it into the shower and pleasure himself with it. And they do this for 3 days. 3 days they carry this routine on. Like, absolutely fucking disgusting. After 3 days, they decide to discard of Exie's head and they put it in some sort of trunk and they just dropped it in an alleyway. And this poor guy was walking home from work and he's seen this trunk on the side of the road and he's thinking, oh, there might be some money in there, there might be a bit of profit to be made out of this. He's opened the trunk and what he's greeted with is not anything that he could sell. It's not any money, nothing of value. It's somebody's head. A few days before the head was found, the bodies of Karen and Exie were actually discovered. Now obviously Exie's body was decapitated, so her head was missing. So this guy rang the police and reported that he'd found a human head. So the police put 2 and 2 together and then it was confirmed that the body belonged to the head or the head belonged to the body. So now they've got 5 victims on their hands. 5 victims, and it seems like it's the same person, but it doesn't seem like it is definitely the same person going around and targeting runaways and sex workers. And then just 3 days after Doug and Carol decide to discard of Exie's head, another body is actually found. And this body was found in the woods near San Fernando Valley. I think that's how you say it. I'm not sure, it probably sounds so much cooler in an American accent, but hey ho. And when this body was taken in for an autopsy, this young girl was identified as Marnette Comer. And like Cynthia and Gina, Marnette seemed to be a runaway, but she was using sex work as a means of making an income. So this is how they think Doug managed to get Marnette in the car. And when they found Marnette, she was basically mummified. When I say mummified, I mean mummified. And when the autopsy was performed, it also revealed that Marnette died around 3 weeks ago, so they believe that Marnette was actually Doug's first kill. Now, up until this point, all of Doug's victims had been females. They'd all been either runaways or sex workers. And we believe that even though Carol was there, she says, for one of them, she probably was there for a few more. Well, I don't know, allegedly, you can't prove that. But Carol was never the one to commit the murders, it was always Doug. But this was all about to change. Whilst Doug was out scouring the strip looking for victims, Carol was still visiting the Little Nashville Club. Remember the club that her and Doug had originally met in? She would still go and visit there, and she'd still go and watch Jack, her ex-lover, perform. And one night on the 3rd of August, when Jack was performing, Carol went there, she was drinking, she was watching him perform, and she had a bit too much to drink. And what happens when you have a bit too much to drink? Your lips get a bit loosey, don't they? And hers definitely did. Carol started to confide in Jack and started to tell Jack everything that had been going on. Now, because Jack seemed like a pretty normal individual, this horrified him like it would anyone. And he was like, okay, I'm gonna have to go to the police and tell the police what you just told me, because this guy is a lunatic. He's going around killing innocent women. And I guess this made Carol shit her pants, basically. She was like, oh no, what have I just done? I don't know whether I don't know how she expected him to react. Like, what did she think he was going to be like? Oh cool, right, yeah, he's just going around killing people, okay. Like, obviously not. So Carol had to think of a way to shut Jack up. And how do you permanently shut someone up? That's right, yeah, you kill them. Somehow, even though Carol had told Jack this information about what they'd been doing, he somehow felt comfortable in her company, because on the 5th of August, she went to the the club, the Little Nashville Club again. She watched him perform, and then after he had performed, she convinced him that it would be a good idea for him and her to go back to his van to have sex. If your ex-partner's just told you that her and her new partner have been going around murdering people, would you really feel comfortable going somewhere, anywhere with them, let alone to sleep with them? Because I'll tell you something for nothing, I definitely would bloody not. Somehow Jack seems to think that this is a great idea, so him and Carol go back to his van. When they get in the van, Carol pretends that they're gonna sleep together, so she tells him to lay down on the bed. When he gets on the bed, when he lays down, she then shoots him. She shoots him a fair few times, to be honest, but then she realises he's not dead, so then she gets a knife and she starts stabbing him. And then when she's sure that he's dead, he's gone, she then decides to decapitate him. And apparently the reason she did this was so the police couldn't identify the gun that had killed him. She kind of missed the mark with that one, because I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why in a little while. Now, a week after Jack's murder, Carol and Doug, they've left the van there, they've left Doug's headless body in the van. It's hot, the body's decomposing, there's a really bad smell, a foul smell. And the van is very close to the club, the Little Nashville Club, so people start, you know, gathering, complaining about it, and eventually somebody calls the police and says to the police, look, it smells like there's a dead body in there. And I don't think they realised how right they were. The police get into the van. They obviously discover Jack's headless body, and you never guess who was at the club when his body was discovered. That's right. Carol and Doug were there. Living life, having a few drinks, chatting to the locals, and they went outside and they were like, oh, what's all the fuss about? And they were like, oh, there's a dead body in the van. And they were like, oh my god, what? No way. And then the cheek of it, the nerve of it. Carol goes up to the van and she's like, that's Jack's van. Like, I'm his ex-girlfriend. And they're like, yeah, well, we're sorry to tell you, like, there's a headless body in there. She starts screaming and crying and like acting as if this was some sort of painful experience for her. Like, Carol, no, this is not, you're not the victim here, Carol. And then Carol started to hear other things, police talking and people talking about shell casings being found in the van. And this is when she was like, ah shit. Even though she had removed his head because she was trying to prevent the police from discovering or matching the gun that had been used in the killings, she didn't think about the shell casings. And now she's hearing this and she's thinking, oh no, I've messed up here. The police start asking around, they start asking questions, because if there's a headless body in a van that's clearly been murdered, they're not just gonna pursue any leads. So they start asking around, and somebody had actually seen Carol and Jack that day. They saw them walking towards the van, and I believe this was one of Jack's lovers. And she said to the police the last time she'd seen Jack alive was with Carol and they were walking to the van. So they were like, okay. And then another thing that Carol didn't realise was that Jack had actually confided in his friends about what Carol had told him. So obviously the friends said to the police, this is what Jack told us, he was really scared, like. So now the police are thinking, right, okay, we've got to go and speak to this Carol Bundy because something's not right here. The next day, Carol's at home, taking a shower, minding her own business, and there's a knock at the door. She gets out of the shower in a towel, she opens the door, and there's two detectives. They say, can we come in and can we talk to you about finding this body? Carol says, yeah, let me just go and make myself decent, put some clothes on. So she shuts the door, she goes and runs. The nerve that Douglas Clark has, he was in bed with another woman. Apparently he had taken on another girlfriend. He was bored of Carol and now he was interested in somebody else. And Carol was saying, the police are here to talk to us, what do I say, what do I do? And Doug's like, just stay calm, just say that we were together on the night of the murder, we were in bed together. So Carol goes back to the door, she says to the police, yeah, come in. And they say, actually, can we go down to the station to ask you a few questions? Carol's like, yeah, fine. And they start asking her questions. They start saying, where was you on the night of the murder? all the usual questions they would ask. And Carol says, I was with my boyfriend, Douglas Clark, at the time. We was in bed together. Doug corroborated this story and said, yeah, we were together. So they were like, okay, well, you know, go on your merry way then, it can't have been you. Now, from this point on, Carol starts to become very, very, very paranoid. She's still going to work, she's still doing her shifts, and then in one shift, she's like babbling to herself, she's talking to herself, like she's not well. I think it's really starting to take a toll on her, and she goes up to the head nurse and she just says, she splurts it all out, this is what we've been doing. We're the ones that are responsible for the killings, I'm the one responsible for cutting off that man's head, for killing him, blah blah blah. The head nurse is like, what the fuck? So she calls the police and she's like, Carol Bundy has just told me all of this information. So the police are like, bang on it. They come straight to the hospital. By this point, Carol's gone home. When they arrive at Carol's apartment, they search the apartment and they find loads of items of clothing from the victims, well, what they believe to have been from the victims. And they also find the pictures that Doug took of this 11-year-old girl that they were abusing. Do you remember her? Both Carol and Doug were arrested on the 12th of August 1980. They were taken down to the station and they were questioned. Surprise, surprise, both of them tried to blame each other. Carol said that Doug was abusive, that he made her do things that she didn't want to do, like she just went along with it because she was afraid of him, basically. But she did admit to killing Jack. She said that was all me, like she took the blame for that. She didn't let him go down for that. She wanted them to know that that was her. Doug, on the other hand, Doug was denying everything. He was like, no, weren't me, I didn't kill anyone. I didn't kill anyone, I didn't decapitate anyone, I did nothing. And he actually said that it was Carol and Jack. You know, the Jack that Carol had just killed and decapitated. Apparently he was the killer, not Doug. Doug had nothing to do with it. He was completely innocent. And this is the same story that Doug has stuck to ever since. And when I say ever since, I mean ever since. In court, he represented himself, and it said that when he was representing himself, whenever something was said that he didn't like, he would just start screaming at the jury and the judge. And I'm laughing because it's like, if there's one thing you know never to do, it's one, to piss off the bloody judge that's overlooking your trial. But he just didn't seem to care. Like, he was just shouting abuse at the jury, at the judge, just going ham, basically. He didn't represent himself very well, as you can imagine from what I've just said. So luckily the jury didn't buy any of it. They didn't believe that he was innocent. And he was sentenced to 6 first-degree murder charges, and he was sentenced to death in 1983. Now Carol was like, listen, I will give you all of the tea. I will give you all of the tea for a plea deal. And that's exactly what she did. She got up in Doug's trial and she just told them everything. Everything they wanted to know, she told them. And in return, she wasn't given the death penalty. She was just given life imprisonment. But Carol actually died on the 9th of December 2003 from heart failure. Douglas Clark, however, he is still on death row to this day, and he still maintains his innocence. He still denies any wrongdoing, he still denies having anything to do with the killings, and he still says that it was Jack Murray and Carol Bundy that committed the killings. And I actually just want to read you a quote that Doug said. He said, and I quote, "I don't think I'll ever live long enough to get out of here, but you get by. I've always been a very zen person." Zen? Zen. Zen people don't go around chopping other people's heads off or murdering them. And that is the end of today's case/story, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you want to, if you're new here. And I will see you next Tuesday for another Taste of True Crime Tuesday. Bye.